All right, I see that it's 10:01 a.m. Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Heyman, and welcome to today's third webinar in our Open Education for a Better World series. Couple of reminders: we're recording, and I'm asking you if you can remember to mute when you come in. So we have two guests today. We have Mitja and Naomi, both of whom will introduce themselves. We're going to start with Mitja, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Open Education for a Better World project. I look forward to seeing your questions in the chat. As Naomi talks about open instructional design, I'll be minding the chat and trying to keep an eye on questions, and she will have some active activities for us to do as well. So welcome, everyone, and we will start with Mitja.
Hi everybody. So there is an echo for somebody. All right, now you're fine. Okay, so thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So I don't know how many of you actually are participating in the program already, and how many of you are completely new. I am the UNESCO chair on open technologies for OER and open learning. So one of now 7 active chairs in OER, in UNESCO chairs on OER. And so we were actually starting this program 3 years ago as an idea. So we thought that, so we've seen around the globe that there are many challenges in that can be solved with the open education, and particularly with OER as well, and that usually people are not having either enough courage or enough knowledge, or there is no motivation to create those courses. So we said, so why don't we just try to see whether there is a willingness, if there is a, sorry, okay. So if there is a willingness on one side, on the other, of course, if there are experts on the other, since we are involved in this OER community for ages now. And so we started with this small project in 3 years ago, and we even did any decent promotion. So actually what we did was just telling people around that we are having this thing and we want to test it. And in the first year already, we've got like 15 projects and 40 mentors. So 40 people actually participated, helping these applicants to create and develop OER by the end of the year. So we decided this to be a yearly cycle. So yearly cycle, that would mean that we start collecting applicants, we start collecting ideas and challenges at the beginning of the school year, which is somewhere there around September, which would be then the open call. And we have only three prerequisites. So first, this should be a problem that can be solved partly by open educational resource. Then this should be a global thing. So it should be a global problem. It's not about creating OER just for your internal purposes or for something which is there in your university. It's about trying to actually address something which is a global challenge. And then the third thing, of course, is that everything that people are developing is really OER. So it's real license that actually allows anybody then to use, reuse, reschedule, and whatever with these materials, and create something which is an added value. And so after first year, we learned quite a lot. So that was a painful year because we didn't know how this will actually go through. And then you have all these particularities about, mentors from one part of the globe and the applicant from another part of the globe, and the meeting somewhere there in the middle of the night and all this stuff. But, at the end of the day, it was really fun. So what we were amazed of is that everybody involved in this program were so enthusiastic. There's always a lot of enthusiasm behind, and it's always about feeling that there is something that really can change a little bit the world we are living in. And that was then for us a motivation that we started in the next round. So in the next round, we started with the proper call. And in the next round, we got 40 projects and we got 80 mentors. So, you know, it's grown up significantly. So there was a problem for us then when we said, well, you know, this cannot be done anymore from one particular point, coordinating point in the world, which is, you know, our office, which Tanya is sitting right now, right there, if you can see her. But that should be distributed across the globe. So we started to think and talk to some of the people, some of the mentors, if they would be willing to set up regional hubs. And so last year we had 5 regional hubs. So each hub actually then coordinated several projects. And then at the end, we managed to get through all these 14 projects. So how it works is that when you apply, then we coordinate together with all the hub coordinators the proper teams. So we try to assign a proper mentor to the work you are doing, which would on one side be, of course, expertise that you need. So we ask you, so if you are the applicant, we ask you about what is the maturity or what is the status of your project, whether you have content already prepared, whether you do some teaching already. I mean, what is the maturity? Because based on that, we try to figure out what would be the most, the best, sorry. Okay, so what would be the best mentor that actually can support you in your work? And in most cases, there are also 2 mentors. So one mentor which is usually there with the capacity and competencies about the OER, about the technology, about the stuff that you do. And then the other mentor which is actually supporting you also with the topic that you're doing. So for example, if there is a course on mathematics, then you might be ending up as well with the mentor that will help you with the mathematics topic. So what we also say is that it's not mentors and it's not us running the project, it's about the applicant running the project. It's up to you. You have to have the motivation, you have to set up the rules, you have to set up the timeline, and then you are the one actually asking and organizing everything about meetings with your mentors and talking and providing results and all this stuff which is needed for a project. And then hopefully everything end up by the end of June. And at the end of the beginning of July, we try to invite all of you in one place, which is one place in Slovenia, where we actually organize then a weekly event supported by a kind of a summer school. So the idea is we get together, we share all whatever we did, we discuss, we became friends, and we do that for a better world. This year, right now, we are running 83 projects, and we have roughly around 90 mentors. I don't remember, 90 mentors.
Something like that.
Yeah, so it's a big thing. Now, what we, and of course, now we have more hubs than we had in the past. Now, there are 2 things that we find out as well. So it's not just the hub can be only regional, it can only be, you can also be topic-wise. So topic-wise would mean it might happen that you would like to cover globally, for example, a health domain. And for a health domain, you can create your own hub and then invite, with a special sub-call, invite all the people, experts from the health area and the project that might actually comply with the health area to create something which would be then a strategy to cover a complete topic domain. This is what we started last year already with the renewable energy and green energy. So I think that you will have a presentation or somebody will actually explain to you what they're doing. But the idea now is that this is not anymore about the program, it's about the movement. So this open education for a better world, it's becoming a movement, and what we want to do is actually share the mechanism with all of you, and to use this mechanism in either, as I said, so regional or topic view, and then to create this global movement around the globe. So as it is right now, so we, as I said, we are in the 3rd year. We will certainly go for the 4th year, and later on in the 5th, and so on. We are now linking whatever we do very strongly with the OER, UNESCO OER recommendation, which is a document that has been accepted by all your governments. So all your governments accepted the document. We can actually extract them how to open and change legislation policy in your country to allow better introduction or development or financing of the creation of open educational resources. And then on the other side, what we are doing as well with other partners also is to create a let's say a suitable tools. As it is today, the status is that whatever you want to find out a relevant OER which you might be using or reusing, you would be lost because everything is so scattered. There are many repositories across the world. You don't know where to find out, you don't know where to look for. And then, of course, the question is we usually get is who is actually guaranteeing me that the quality of OER is high enough that I can use. So we are developing this platform as well. So, as it is today, hopefully this will be a platform that will be then run by the UNESCO as a open, accessible platform that will actually have the access to OER, which is coming out in different places across the globe. So as you see, it's not just about one program, it's about the complete ecosystem, and we can do that, we cannot do that alone. So we are just too few. So this is why we want to spread this out. We want to make it global. We want to create a global movement supported by everything what we do, not just us, so all the other partners as well. But certainly what we want to have is you. So people, individuals who are willing, who have the commitment, who want to actually participate in this global movement on on opening the education. So this is briefly what I wanted to say. I'm really, really happy that that you are here. In most cases, you will not find people from really all over the place at the same time slot, participating in courses, participating in the program. And I really hope that you would be the next, if you are not yet, the next either applicant, the next mentors. Anybody can be a mentor, of course, or even create your own hub inside the program. So, Jenny, I hope that this was what I wanted to say. If there are any questions.
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on chat, Mitja, and you can keep an eye, if you have time to spend with us, you can keep an eye on chat as well. Thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome to everyone that that joined us a little bit after we got going. So Mitja was introducing the Open Education for a Better World project, and we have a fantastic group of developers and mentors this year. The strong purpose of today's webinar, and this is the third in the series, so if you check out the Open Education for a Better World website, you'll see the other two webinars. We are sharing and talking with developers and mentors in the program information about open instructional design, and our guest today is Naomi Wahls, who is the Europe Hub Coordinator, and she's going to talk us through some of her ideas and her advice for creating open instructional design. So I'll leave it over to you, Naomi, to introduce yourself and to get rolling.
All right, thanks for having me today. So I'm going to actually share my screen so you can actually see the presentation that I have. And we can also share the slides in the chat. I might not be able to see the chat, so Jenny might jump in if you have questions, then you can stop me along the way. The point of this is actually to have an active webinar so you can ask questions and bring up other topics. So I will share the screen now. And there we go. And I do lose the chat. So just to start us off, I'm going to be talking about open instructional design and assessments. I'm a learning developer here at TU Delft. I also am a co-instructor of designing an online course and teaching an online course. And the 4 topics for today's webinar that I was asked to talk about are the organization of a learning experience, the learning outcomes, learning levels and accessibility, active learning and self-directed and distance context, and turning resources and assessments into courses or texts. So in the chat box, I'm going to ask you, what does open education mean to you in 3 words? So when you think of open education, what are 3 words that come to your mind specifically? So if you can add your words to the chat box, that would be great. I can't see it, but what I do plan to do is at least be able to take some of those words, and then I'm going to be adding them into a picture later. And so I'll share that out later with everyone in the mentoring program. So again, what does open education mean to you in 3 words? I obviously live here in the Netherlands. I'm originally an American, and I've been here a little bit over a year. The reason why the bicycle is here on this image is because, to me, open education often reminds me of the bicycle in my experience in the Netherlands. And my 3 words are independence, freedom, and equality. And that's what I see that open education brings. Because that's what I also see that the bicycle brings to me here in the Netherlands. Independence in the sense that when I first landed, I was able to go anywhere, take things with me and take my son with me. And you can even bring friends, you can take boxes. And I was so surprised at what you can actually do. And I no longer had to depend on a car or other people. I also found that the bicycle gave me freedom. I could go to the beach. I could go to any city I wanted to, as long as I could bike that far. Equality in the sense that you can wear a suit jacket, heels, flip-flops, shorts, and we all are on the same bike path. We all have the same right and access to it. And that's the way I see open education. Open education, to me, brings independence, freedom, and equality to the learners. So let's talk about how you can bring those aspects and the aspects that you're bringing up in the chat into your instructional design of your course. On the first topic of the open instructional design, what exactly do we mean when we talk about open instructional design? If you have a concept of it, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. But the things that I immediately think about are we talking about designing OER? Are we talking about the open practices while we create an OER? Or are we talking about first looking at what open educational resources are already available before we actually create something and even design it? Maybe we can combine things, and that can be part of the design, is the blending, the reuse, the reuse. So when we look at the organization of a learning experience, these are all the questions that I come up with. How will a learner experience the course? Who am I actually planning to build the course for? And more importantly, as I design it, who might not be able to access the course because of the design that I have created? So the things to think about when you're looking at the learners who can't access it are, how open is the course going to be? Will the participants simply absorb content? Can participants interact with the content, with each other? And if we're talking more about open, Can the participants create, modify, or reuse content even? I added some quotes. They're a little bit older, but these are the quotes that I often think of when I'm looking at the learners inside of open courses. In 2016, the MOOC participants were noted to be mainly male, affluent, self-regulated learners, had flexible work-life schedules, were digital literate, and were proficient in English. So if those were our main learners, and we're trying to design courses that are more open to attract more learners, how can we make it so that the learners who are not in the main audience, how can we include them as well? And some of the learners that were noted to not be traditionally inside of the MOOC courses were the borderless, genderless, or gender blind, race blind, class blind, and bank account blind. How do we include them in our learning? And the slides, we'll be sharing a link, and we should be already have shared the link inside of the chat, but we'll also share it again, and we'll share it out in Twitter as well. Since I'm a part of TU Delft, I wanted to share the online learning experience model, and this is how we base instructional design for our courses. On our TU Delft website, we have an online learning hub with lots of different resources specific to a course development process. And what you'll find there is this online learning experience model and a radar graph, but you'll also find the radar graph tool. The model is based on 8 course design principles, and you see those right in front of you. We suggest that you select 3 as your focus when you build your course. What's most important to you for your learners? And you can use that radar graph tool, which is an Excel file, to figure out which of those 3 principles are your actual focus. And I've created or added the links here so you can actually retrieve the Excel file and actually look at the PDF that explains each of these principles more in depth. What I wanted to also express is that there are some considerations on design, specifically for professional development. There was a recent article that came out on when co-occurring factors impact professional development, specifically the adult learners. There are 3 considerations, one being educational background, the second being a disability, the third being the status. And all 3 of these, in that article, it describes how those learners can have impact inside of the courses and how learning may be different for them, or they may feel challenges or experience learning differently. Inside of the online courses, what is nice is students have the ability to sometimes not have to be focused on a particular date or deadline. And other courses, they actually still have to do those deadlines. When you're considering some of these background and the disability and the status, sometimes people have to leave a course for a specific reason, but they want to finish and they can come back and finish later. And other times, the course is simply too restrictive to allow them to do that. That's one of the beauty of this open course type platform, because you can actually build courses to allow students and more students to actually access content and interact and build on their professional development. Here at TU Delft, on that online learning hub, the course development process is set up in different phases. The main one for this particular webinar that I wanted to reference was the plan phase. Because when we talk about learning outcomes, learning levels, and accessibility, we first need to look at what is the objective that you have for your content. What do you want your learner to learn? What should they be able to do? Are they going to be able to do something, or are they just absorbing content? On the learner levels, how many people are coming into the course? Where are they coming from? Did they have prerequisites? Do you need to give them a background information to be able to get to a certain level within the course? How accessible is the content within the course? When we're looking at the learning outcomes, I look at the Bloom's taxonomy, and what you'll find on that online learning hub is you'll find a lot of different resources, different files that you can use when you're building your course. And this particular one, the Bloom's revised taxonomy for learning objectives, is there as well. The point of the learning objectives is that you gradually build your learners' skills within the course. So they wouldn't necessarily jump into a course and immediately create or evaluate. They would first learn concepts, remember them, apply them, analyze them, see how others are doing things, then evaluate, and then create content. When you're looking at your online course that's open, what are the students particularly going to be able to do? Or are they going to be able to do something? I think often when we're doing open courses, we're giving content and not necessarily getting to the next levels of the assessments and having students do things with the content. And more importantly, doing something with other peers or within their own networks, within their own local settings. I mentioned the bicycles before, and it's something that I continually look back at, specifically in open education, because as I'm looking at designing a course and designing the learning levels and looking at the outcomes, I look at the bicycle paths. I am fascinated that the Netherlands has such a developed bike path system. It's very easy to go from one city to another and to go to the beach and take an hour, even hour and a half bike ride without really ever stopping. You're just cycling and there's nothing that really stops you on the way. But there's people from all walks of life. There's kids, there's parents, there's guys in suits. And what I am fascinated at is when the children are learning, or the beginners essentially, all the other adults get out of the way and the children might be weaving in and out. And sometimes you'll see a parent with a hand on the back of the child, and everyone else slows down and waits till they can pass. And then they're very considerate. When I look at open education, you will have beginners in courses. Sometimes that was not who you intended to be in the course. But are they feeling welcome that they can come back? Are they welcome on the same path that they will be on later? Just like that kid on a bike path that will eventually be on his own. And that's why I compare this, because I feel in open education, there should be some sort of balance where people feel welcome to at least browse through the content before they move into being on the upper levels or experience. But at the same time, that the more experienced people who are in the course, who are possibly the reason why the course was created, feel like they can still access the content and aren't prohibited by those beginners who are in the same course space. So essentially, we need to design our open courses so it's easy access for all to get from one point to another, or for the reason that they are there for that course. As such, the principles of universal design for learning are very important, and the cultural responsive process as well. Sorry, I'm actually not able to see all my slides. What I put it up here is the universal design for learning, and I added a PDF that was actually an open education resource, and I added the link from where it originally was taken. The 7 principles are listed here. For the universal design, the 7 principles are that there's equitable use, flexibility in the use, simple and intuitive for the learner to use, perceptible information, tolerance of error, And I find that one kind of interesting because, again, those beginners can make a mistake without being ashamed and being surrounded by people who are experts in the field. The low physical effort and the size and space for approach and use. These are some design principles that could be used when you're thinking about building your course. There's also a video that talks further about the universal design for learning, and the resource that it originally came from is listed over here as well. I'm not going to show the video, but again, we're sharing the slides and you'll be able to access that video for further information on that. Moving on to the active learning and self-directed and distant context. If we think back at the TU Delft online learning experience model, one of the principles was active. That being that the activities are engaging, interesting, relevant, promoting learning by doing. Learners are required to actively contribute to the learning activities. If the course is just giving them content and they're not actively participating or being a part of that course, then they are missing out on that active learning. What are they able to do with the content? And in the chat, this is an opportunity for you to think about active learning things that your students in an open course could do, even if there are thousands of students. What could they do inside of a course based on your content area? What are some ideas that you have activity-wise that they could actually do? So if you can think of anything, what are some of the activities that you could have students do in an open course? I'm just going to add that now, that you can add something in the content or in the chat there. And it looks like we're talking about sharing experiences in a discussion, finding books and articles that they could share with each other, connecting with each other, and listening activity. In an open course, going back to the active learning, in an open course, not all of courses are designed that students can interact with each other. But clearly, some students may need that based on their learner level or for various reasons. So that's some great activity ideas that could be used. On another topic of turning resources and assessments into courses or textbook, one of the other principles of the TU Delft online learning experience model is interactive. And this being the learning activities ensure learner to learner, learner to course team, or learner to content interactions to promote active engagement. This is similar to the active learning as well, and they're somewhat linked. So I added this collaborative learning as a key component. If you build in collaborative learning into an open course that may have thousands of students, some of the immediate fears that come to mind are, how would those students interact if there's time differences? It's challenging enough to be in a webinar for 1 hour, but what if they have to produce something together? Well, collaborative learning can also be them working with their peers locally. So you could ask them to do something where they interact in groups locally in their area and then share out to the course and maybe get peer feedback. That may be one way of doing some of the activities. If you have some other ideas, feel free to share those in the chat. The point again of this webinar is that you can be actively participating and give suggestions and things that worked well for you as well. When we talk about turning resources and assessments into courses and textbooks, it also reminds me that the students can help find resources that are already open that could be bundled together as a textbook or added to the content you're already creating. The same is true for PDFs, videos. What can they find to add to it? What if they add another case and they give another example that's more regional for them or relevant specifically to them? And I'm just checking to see on the chat as well what other ideas are coming in for the active learning. Just wanted to see. Sharing a video capturing the activities. That could also be an idea as well. So you could share the video, but you have to create the space for them to actually build those videos and to be able to share it. So part of that on the design is deciding what platform you could use. And if you haven't decided that, that may be dependent upon the university or the corporation that you work with. There's some additional resources that I've included here. And I'll be opening up some of the links so that we can share those out and actually talk a little bit more specifically about those. The top tips for assessment and MOOCs. This actually is a PDF that has online courses, and it also has MOOCs, that being the open courses. The toolkit that's listed here includes how to go find resources. So if you're looking for content specifically, which should be one of your first steps in open education, this will give you a space where you can actually go search for content and search for some of the ideas. There's 2 books here that are open books that are specific to design, so that can give you further ideas based on the theory. And thank you. It looks like we also have the assessment tools link there as well. And it looks like we have another suggestion of puzzles, creation of concept map, collaboratively or individually. Puzzles is also a great way of being collaborative and active. And going back into that active learning, puzzles specifically is also part of the game-based learning. So it adds fun and it attracts people to continue, and it motivates them possibly to connect the content to the activity that you're asking them to do. I'm going to actually share out the brochure that we have that's on the online learning experience radar graph. And what you'll see is a traditional online course is more supportive, more innovative, and more active. And what we tend to see in open courses, because there's a lot more students, is that yes, it's more flexible for the student. It's possibly more inclusive of different topics, but you'll notice that it's actually less interactive and there's less support. But that's something that you can also build upon based on when you're building your course. When we talked about the actual students inside of the course and who the learners are, it's something that you're thinking about, like, how are you piloting your course? Where are you putting it? How many students are going to be in it? If it's open, what is the purpose of your course being open if there's only 10 students in it? Where are you getting your students from? And that's part of the, not necessarily marketing, but when you're thinking about the course and your purpose and what you're building the course for, you need to think about how many people may be in the course. And if it's just built for your country or your own university, that's fine, because at least it's still open and maybe someone else can still build upon it. But then maybe it can be more supportive and more active. But if there's thousands of people in it, it may not be possible for you to support it as much, or you have to build it separately or differently to support it. So it depends on the purpose of your course, who you're actually planning to have in the course, and if it's just for a few runs, and deciding how many people are going to be there. The exact principles that we have here are listed, so you can see. And on the Online Learning Hub, what you'll find is different resources under that plan phase. One of them being this online experience tool, and that's the Excel file that I had mentioned. The first part introduces you and tells you about the tool itself. You can look at the criteria which is explaining the different principles, and you can score the course that you're planning to create. From there, you create the graph, and that graph will look similar to one of these models up here. What's nice about it, as you plan your course, you can figure out which of the principles are important to you based on your content, the audience that you're building for, and who you really, really want in that course. I'm just going to go back to the presentation since we're almost finishing up, and then I'm going to have some time for questions too. I've added my link here for the email if you have any questions, and then the overall project page for the mentoring program. But I also added some of the references so you can kind of see where I had pulled some of the information from. What you'll notice is I didn't actually talk about the exact assessments that you could make. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. That way I can actually see the chat and we can have a little bit more interaction. But what I wanted to point out is in an open course, you'll be thinking about how are you going to grade? Because when you do these assessments, you always have to figure out, if I'm going to be grading thousands of students, do I want them to do that on their own and I teach them how to self-grade? Or I at least explain it in a way that they can do it on their own, even if it's for the first time and they're doing self-assessments? Or will they be doing peer reviews? Or will they be doing some sort of mixture of all three? That all depends too on how much time they have inside the course. The same is true for active learning. How much time does it take for them to bond with each other? How much time does it take for them to grasp the concepts? If it's only a 2 or 3 week course, there may not be much active learning there. There may not be much as far as collaboration, but they still may be able to do different things, and it's still open. And they may be able to help build an open book together by slowly adding resources. Again, it depends on what kind of time frame that you actually have them to build content together and what you exactly have planned. I don't know if there's a question there, but if you do have a question, feel free to let me know or put it in the chat if you're not able to talk. That would be fine too. I am going to share out these resources that we have. The main point for today was just to briefly go over some ideas and some concepts in this open instructional design. I do want to ask, as you are building an open course, how many of you are working with peers and doing open practice and talking to peers about the course that you're creating? How many of you are actually involving other people who are other experts in your field? If you
Hi,
can.
Naomi, it's Jenny. I'm just jumping into, I see a question about, can you highlight a few tips for open textbook creation? And I know we included that kind of as a topic today, but not the main topic. Do you have a couple of ideas for open textbooks?
Yeah, so it depends on the open textbook, if you're having students create it together or if you're doing it with a peer yourself. So say, for instance, you're building a course on energy, since we know that's one of the theme hubs. It could be that you're actually building your open textbook, or you're creating it together with people in that same hub. Or you could be looking at peers within your own university. You could be looking at peers across the globe. However, you can actually have students inside the course, or your learners inside of the course space, maybe create a textbook together. The question here is, what tools and resources do they have to actually find the content? But more importantly, will they see open practice from you? So if you're asking them to create a textbook together, how do they see open education? It could be that in an open textbook, you're asking them to create different cases or give different examples. And that could be great, especially if you're talking about energy. Maybe you'd have different cases throughout the world and they each have a different region, they work together. And you talk about how they will write a textbook together, they write a chapter together, or they evaluate the content that they find and discuss whether or not it's relevant to put into a combined textbook that they do together, more as a reuse with modifications. So some of those are some ideas of how you can do it, but it depends on what exactly you have as a content, how many weeks they have, and what's the goal that you have. But again, if you're asking your students to do something, to actively create something together or modify, it's good to show them through your own practices as well. Did we have another question as well, I think?
We had a question about assessments, Naomi. How many,
Yeah.
how much assessment would you include in a 1 credit course? Let's say it was 2 or 3 weeks in length. How much assessment would you give?
So the part about assessment is we do suggest that you assess them regularly. It's not something that they should just have one time at the very end. So if you're talking about like a 3-week course that you say for 1 credit, you wouldn't necessarily want them to just have one assessment at the end and not know how they're doing for the other 2 weeks. So in that sense, you would do something that's possibly ungraded as practice activities before they get to a graded activity. And those could be something that they just practice on and they obviously see right answers, or they could post their answers in a discussion and others can comment on those. So they get some sort of feedback, knowing kind of where they're at inside of the course. I don't want to say there's any right answer as to how many assessments there should be, but in a 1 credit course, if it's only 3 credits or it's only for 3 weeks, you also need to be considerate in professional development that most people work 40 hours or more a week. And it's not necessarily realistic for them to do many activities that are graded and then have it each week. So I would say some sort of practice activity at least every week, and at least 1 final grade, but it'd be nice to have like a midpoint grade or some sort of grade where they kind of know, I'm getting it, I'm going to pass the course, and giving them that ability to fail and still be able to succeed in the end. Yeah? And I think we have another question too, or no? One on the peer review is not working effectively for grading. What do exactly for grading in large numbers of participants? So doing peer reviews, I think it is.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Okay, you can continue. Maybe I can ask later.
That's fine. This other one is typed, so if you want to go ahead and ask your question so you don't forget it, that would be fine too.
Okay, this is Mustafa from Bangladesh. Actually, is it essential to use the OER only when we develop the open course? What's your opinion? So when we develop the open courses, so do you think that all the content should be OER? So we have to use OER only. And if we develop the course, so is it essential to put any license on this for the whole course? Is it, yeah. So it's better if I get some opinion from you.
Yeah, so as part of this mentoring program, if you're a developer, you're committed to creating a course in the open. And there are open licenses, and I don't have the link right now, but if we can share that, that would be great. Let me see if I can find one for you real quick. But you would want to make sure that you've selected an open license for the course, and then anything inside of the course has the same license unless you specify it. And it's kind of the same as citing for a paper. You would want to cite something that you find so that it's very clear that it was not openly licensed. Does that answer your question as far as the content inside of the course? Yeah?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Actually,
Yeah.
the concern is like, if there is any, I don't know whether so OE4BW World Authority, they have any stand, I mean, default stand for any particular license for the course as a whole? Because whenever, since I'm one mentor, I'm mentoring 2 projects. So sometimes they ask the questions of what kind of license. When they are going to develop the course, so they have to use the contents from several sources. So, for example, if the completed course is licensed under CC BY, then they have to be careful to pick the contents from different sites or repositories. So that's why it is important to understand whether any default stand, I mean, there is any stand for any default license like CC BY or CC BY SA. So it will be better if we can know this.
I actually just added the link below here so you can see the different information on the licenses. I don't believe we have a specification of to which of the licenses that you absolutely have to have. And the reason for that is your university may have already specified which open license they want you to use, but you do have the commitment of using an open license. So it may be dependent on your university. So you would just want to check in with your university and possibly either your hub coordinator or your mentor to follow up on the exact open license of the content that you're creating. Yeah?
Hi, Naomi. I'm just adding that I would avoid the use of the non-derivative license.
Yeah.
There are sometimes good reasons to use that, but there's typically a very special case. What happens with a non-derivative ND license is it prevents another user from adapting the resource. And so that's problematic when what we're trying to promote is open use and creating the opportunity for people to contextualize a resource. So that one I would avoid if you can, but we're willing to talk about it, I think.
Yeah, and then I was just going to try to jump into the other question that was here before, and that was on the peer review, the experience that someone has had with the peer review not being effective for grading for a large number of participants. This may be true, particularly depending on the platform that you're using, but it also depends on how many peer reviews you have in a course, how long the course is. Did the students have practice with peer reviews? This is the first peer review they've ever had. And if that's some of the things that you need to consider, then the grading scheme connected to the actual peer review would also need to be considered. So if this is the first time that the peer review has ever been used for these learners, and say that they are on a bachelor level, and so they aren't used to grading peers or each other, and you don't have a lot of time to actually teach them how to do peer review, but you have other aspects in the course that are more important as far as grading, then the grading on this peer review would be less compared to maybe another exam or a different paper that is staff graded, or in some other assignment that they're doing. So you would balance kind of that grading scheme with the experience that you're having with the peer reviews. But I would also say that on the peer reviews being effective, sometimes we're just doing too many. So if there's a 4-week course, it's not really possible for them to have 4 peer reviews because they have to submit something, wait for peers to respond and do their part, and then be able to continue on possibly with the next portion of the content that you're asking them to do. Hopefully that answered that question. But do you have any other questions that are coming in? I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anyone's questions on the assessments. Yeah? Does anyone have any other questions? So the question is how to prepare an assessment for a 3-week course, especially if it is interactive, how to grade these assignments. If it's interactive and it's only for 3 weeks, I don't know what the content is or the topic area is, and what the learning objectives are. So if you're asking them to be able to physically do something with the content at the end, then the assessments are progressively getting them to the point where they can actually do the activity or the end goal. So let's say that in energy, I think that was one of the themes before. Let's say that they're learning about energy before they create a document, and then they share it with their peers, and then they present it locally. I don't know what the topic of all of the content may be, but that might be the goal of the course. So then they're learning the topic content. They're having some sort of practice with the content to make sure that they actually are gaining the information. So there's the ungraded assignments. And then there would be the activities that you're actually grading them on, which is, on this case, being some sort of document that they're creating. They'd be getting feedback, and then they would turn it in, and then maybe be able to produce it locally and share that out with other people. So hopefully that makes sense. Keeping in mind that if this is a 3-week course, they're not walking out with a PhD, they're not walking out with a master's. They're hopefully coming in to be able to learn something that they can do, or learn something about a topic, so that they can walk away a little bit more knowledgeable about it and feel like they can participate in conversations on the topic. So what is the actual goal of the course? And making sure that the assignments are aligned with those exact goals. Do we have any other questions? Because I think we have about 3 more minutes.
So yes, once again, can I ask one question? For example, so in terms of learning outcomes, so what the projects I'm mentoring, I'm just suggesting them to use the learning outcomes. So in your presentation, you mentioned some in some cases the learning objectives also. So do you mean that these two things should be kind of interchangeably used or not? I mean, whether we should use only the learning outcomes for the courses, or we can use also learning objectives.
Great question. I don't consider them to be interchangeable. I consider it that you have the learning objective, what you want the student to do. And the learning outcomes essentially are more or less what the student is actually able to do inside the course based on the content that they receive and the activities that they complete. So there should be an alignment between the assignments, the assessments, and the actual learning objectives. So the learning objectives are what you've planned them to be able to do. And looking at the Bloom's revised taxonomy, that's an important part of deciding what you really want the students to be able to physically do inside your course, or what they should be able to, maybe it is just a 2-week course and they're just gaining information and they're able to use the terms in the field of energy, for example, in that theme. I'm going to share out the Bloom's revised taxonomy, and I'm also going to share out the model of the learning objectives, which shows that it would be building, I realize I'm sending that to the wrong thing, but you would be looking at how to build those learning objectives so that they start off by the lower end of learning, and they're kind of absorbing some of the content, and then they build towards being able to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, which are more of the learning outcomes of what the student is able to do at the end. Does that make sense?
Hi, Naomi. I'm just jumping in also to remind everyone that we have about a minute to go for our official time, but if you have a few more minutes for questions, that's great. And just to remind you, if you, in the chat window, if you roll your cursor down to the bottom right, there's a pull-down menu called More, M-O-R-E, and if you click on it, you can save the chat to your computer, and that will save all the links that we've been sharing as we go along. And we're also going to include the links on the Open Education for a Better World website. I'm going to build a reference page from the webinars we've been doing and share out all those links as well. But just so you know, you can save the chat before you go.
Yeah, and I'll be also sharing this out in Twitter, and I'll share out my slides. And if you do have any questions, though, feel free to email me. That would be fine as well. Are there any other questions, though, particularly on instructional design or on the assessments? No? Well, thanks for joining.
Thanks, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really very nice and meaningful presentation. I enjoyed the presentation very much. So if you share the resources, then I will go through and it will be helpful for us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. I did go through the presentation pretty quickly because I know we didn't have a lot of time, but I wanted to make sure everyone had time to ask questions if they did. I also, like Jenny had mentioned, because when I do webinars, I always pre-record at least a small portion of it. I might also share that as well, so you can see like a more standard kind of presentation on it in addition to this as well.
I'm not seeing a lot of final questions, Naomi.
Nope, me either. So
right.
I think this might be it. Again, I'll share out the slides. And then if you do have any questions though, feel free to let me know.
Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your advice and your tips, Naomi. And we look forward to seeing you again as part of this project.
Yeah, sounds good. It's great to be here and look forward to seeing you as well.